if it's okay with you.
Yes, okay.
Right. Hello and assalamu alaikum. Dear participants of webinar are arranged by Islam and Liberty Network. This is called Edraak webinar, which we do once in every month, in which we bring out issues of contemporary importance presented by scholars and fellows of ILN around the world. And this series is presented with support and in partnership with our friends and institutions. And this particular one is by, we also supported by the Atlas Network, Najmuddin Erbakan University in Konya, and SFL, Students for Liberty. And our esteemed guest speaker today is Dr. Mustafa Acar, a great scholar of economics based in Turkey, an economist affiliated with Najmuddin Erbakan University for many years, and an author of an astounding number of books, 42 books to his credit, including several important translations from English, particularly classics like The Wealth of Nations under his credit. So he has, Mustafa Acar has played a very important role in spreading awareness about the ideas and principles of free markets. His own areas of specialization include international economics, globalization, free markets, and as the topic today, free markets in the age of in the age of populism, I think it is very relevant to what is happening in the world with the recent outcome of US presidential elections. And we are going to listen to him, and we're going to have a, I think, very engaging discussion on this important topic, which will interest all of us. So the format would be such that we will invite Dr. Mustafa to present first his ideas. And after his presentation, then I will engage in discussion, but I'd be very happy to have inputs and comments and questions from the audience of this webinar as well. Dr. Mustafa, can I now request to start your presentation? And thank you so much again for joining us.
Sure, you're welcome, sir. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, Dr. Salman, I am happy to be with you to speak to your audience, to our friends all over the world on a timely, very timely topic. So thank you for inviting me to speak on the fourth Edraak seminar of ILN, a platform that I actually take it very seriously. You are doing a very good job to promote, basic liberties, rights and liberties and freedoms, and the competence of values, Islamic values, with the institutions of free markets, individual liberties, etc. It is very important, and it is going to give a meaning to our lives. In today's world, as you just suggest, we are living in a world of populism. Populism is everywhere. Populism is on the rise. And it is a very timely topic to discuss because just US presidential elections, remember 2 days ago, Donald Trump, one of the populist leaders of the world today, has won second time in the US elections. I think it is a first in the United States history that a former president, after having a break his term, he is coming to power for a second time. So let me present my ideas on what's going on, what is populism, what are the main characteristics of populist movements, populist leaders, and how can we correlate them with the ideas of free markets, open markets, etc., etc. Okay, let me share my screen, which I prepared for this conversation, if I can.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see it? Okay.
Yes, we can see it. Yes. Perfect.
Now, the topic is free markets in the age of populism, which is very timely, which is very relevant to our contemporary world because it is a topic of, part of our lives today. So in the context of today's presentation, I would like to, first of all, say a few words on why is it an important topic, why we should give some thought on this, free markets in the age of populism. Okay. What is populism? I am going to say a few words on that. And I am going to say a few words on free markets or pillars of a free market economy and implications of populism on free markets. What are the implications, main, implications of populist leaders and populist political movements on free markets, on open markets, okay? In that regard, we have to deal with a little bit on the arguments for free trade versus arguments against free trade, or arguments for protectionism and arguments against protectionism. And then later on, I am going to deal with a little about populism and economic globalization, populism and state intervention, and the future of free markets in a populist world. What kind of a world are we expecting in such a world where populist movements are gaining power, coming to power everywhere? Populism is on the rise. And in the end, I will share my ideas on what can be done as people, intellectuals, educated people, academics, researchers, non-governmental organizations, activists, okay? What can be done under these circumstances regarding populism versus free markets or open markets? Okay, we have already touched upon the importance of this topic because now, my dear friends all over the world, by the way, thank you for sharing your time from different countries at this hour. In Turkey, it is 2 p.m. In the afternoon. In Kuala Lumpur time, it is, I think, 7 p.m. At night, and different time zones all over the world. Okay. Thank you for sharing your time with us at this hour. Now, we are living in a populist world. It is very important. It is very hot. Right now, populism is on the rise everywhere, in every continent. Okay, populist leaders are gaining power. They are winning elections. They are coming to power. Just 2 days ago, US had a presidential elections, and Donald Trump, which is one of the most famous populist leaders in the world today, has won the elections of the most powerful nation or the largest economy in the world. So if United States were just an ordinary, developing country, we wouldn't be, ascribing too much importance for that. But this is United States. It's a superpower. It has a dominance over world politics, over the critical regional as well as international strategic issues, and it has the technology, the military power, and the economic and political power all over the world on very, different issues. So we have to take it seriously because there will be implications of these elections and the new populist policies of the United States, not only on the United States internally, but all over the world as well. There are populist leaders in Latin America. There are populist leaders in Europe, populist governments, as well as in Turkey. Turkey has been ruled for more than 2 decades now by a populist political movement and populist political leader. Right. So it has important implications on our daily lives. So the rise of populism all over the world, in Europe, in the United States, Latin America, in Asia, in Turkey, etc., it has very important implications on our daily lives. On what? Like what? It will have some implications on free markets, open borders, economic policies, free trade versus protectionism, government intervention to the economy, how frequent, how strict, how large are they? Government intervention and inflation. We have been going through an inflationary process all over the world, especially in some countries like Turkey. So, in other words, my friends, let me take an excerpt from, I think, an ancient Greek philosopher. He was saying in a conversation, "Why are you laughing? I am telling your story," he said. Okay, so this is, if you think, why are we talking about this topic? Come on, there are a lot of other topics to talk about, to give a thought on. Why are we paying attention to this? Because it is very timely, it is very hot, it is going to have, and it has been actually posing important implications on our daily lives. So it is hardly our own story, guys, we are talking today. So let's continue. What is populism? Populism, populist movement, etc. What is that? So generally speaking, one can say populism refers to political movements that claim to represent the people. Okay. Okay. To represent the people against what? Against the interest of some pursued elite, others, those big guys, giants, the elite, representing people, ordinary men on the street against interests of some other big giants or the elite. It can also be defined as a political program or movement that claims to champion the common person as opposed to a pursued elite or establishment. So populist political movements, populist political leaders always say, okay, I am defending, I am supporting the man on the street, the common person, my people, as opposed to what? Those elites, big guys, some establishments, some giant firms, some enemies, outside forces, external dangers, etc., etc. We can, again, in general context, we can talk about two different types of populism. One is democratic populism, the other one, authoritarian populism. Democratic version can be defined as a political movement that seeks to defend the interests of people through reform, not revolution, not using harsh means, but rather trying to heighten or represent the interests of people, increase their welfare through reforms rather than revolution. Okay. The other version, the authoritarian populism, is something that revolves around charismatic leaders who appeal to embody the will of the people in order to consolidate their own power. And in our contemporary world, my dear friends, unfortunately, the second version, the authoritarian version of populism, is on the rise, is very common. So that typically, when you talk about a populist leader, a political populist movement, you are talking about a movement or leader that revolve around a charismatic leader who appeal to embody the will of people in order to consolidate their own power. Here, hey people, I am for you. I am at the service of you. Come on. If I am not here, then there are a lot of dangers that you are going to be exposed to. Come on, you have to, join around me. You have to support me. You have to put me in the power so that I can represent you, I can save you, I can protect you against many dangers, etc., etc. So there are strong nationalist sentiments in populist movements. Populist political jargon has a lot to do with national sentiments, distrust of institutions, and the presence of state intervention. As I said, unfortunately, in today's world, the latter, the authoritarian populism, is on the rise, is dominating everywhere, and there are a lot of important implications to our daily lives, my dear friends. Then let's talk about free markets a little bit, because we are talking about free markets in the age of populism. Let's remind, I am sure many of you guys have already, thought about it, gave some, spend some time on these main principles and institutions of free market economy. Just to summarize them, if we are talking about free markets, free market economy, we are talking about open markets. That means there is free entry and exit from the markets. Nobody is disqualified from entering or from exiting. So there is free competition, in other words, okay? Any entrepreneur, any businessman, any company, any firm is free to enter into the industry or exit from that industry. We are talking about free competition. We are talking about open borders, that is free trade. People, businessmen, companies, firms are free to exchange whatever they produce, whatever they market, okay? Not only within their own borders, but whomever they wish to sell their products, their goods and services. In other words, in a free market economy, borders are open, free trade is a norm, so goods and services are allowed to cross the borders, okay? Also, in a free market economy, there have to be property rights. Property rights has to be observed and protected against the assault of others, okay? Also, there must be freedom of choice and entrepreneurship. That means those who save, individuals, are free to choose to spend their money on whatever goods and services they would like to have. And also entrepreneurs, the businessmen and women, companies and firms are free to invest in any industry that they would like to invest, okay? They are free to allocate their resources in any industry that they would like to invest. In a free market economy, also referring to the classical liberal economic thought coming from Adam Smith and his colleagues, okay, from centuries ago, there is limited government is a must. So the free market economy prefers no intervention or government intervention at a minimal level. So they say the best government is the least government. That is, the best government is the one who intervene in the markets at a minimal level. No intervention is the best situation. So if there is no intervention, if the borders are open, if markets are open, if there is free competition, if there are property rights are protected, if there is freedom of choice and entrepreneurship, prices of goods and services will be determined by free interaction of market forces, that is demand and supply. Producers and consumers meet at the marketplace, they negotiate, and the prices are determined as a result of demand and supply. So this is basically what we understand from free markets and main pillars of a free market economy. Okay, now let's combine the two. Populism on one side, free markets on the other side. So what would be the implications of populism on free markets? We would say, unfortunately, negative. The implications of populist movements, populist political movements on free markets is not positive, is not encouraging. Just the opposite, it is negative, it is discouraging. Because populist political movements, populist political leaders seek after higher and frequent government intervention to the market. They argue for protectionism, protecting the local domestic industries against foreign competition. Okay, so there are heavy, frequent, and high levels of regulations everywhere. Daily regulations, increased every day almost. There are strong nationalist sentiments, okay, and there is some sort of distrust of institutions. In a populist movement, as I said, almost everything revolves around a charismatic, powerful leader, and he or she decides what's going on, what is going to be done tomorrow, rather than institutions, rather than rules and regulations. They arbitrarily decide, okay, today we are going to do such and such and such. And nobody can be sure about what is going to be the situation after a week, after a month, within 2 months. So there are arbitrary decisions, hence lower predictability. We cannot predict what is going to happen 2 months from now, 6 months from now. Who is going to be governing the central bank, for instance, a very critical, economic institution all over the world in a contemporary world? We cannot be sure who is going to be governing central bank, or who is going to be doing such and such heavy, important, critical responsibilities within a few weeks. That means when there is populism, when there is powerful populist movements and populist political leaders, unfortunately, there is some sort of distrust of institutions, weakening the institutions and putting the personality of the charismatic leader in front. And his arbitrary decisions, which leads to unavoidably, unfortunately, lower predictability. So an age of populism means unfortunately, an age of unpredictability, my dear friends. Unpredictability means risk, higher risk. If you cannot foresee what's going on, what will be the prices of inputs, prices of energy, prices of such and such, labor cost, etc., within a few months, 6 months from now, then as an investor, you cannot actually estimate a realistic cost and benefit analysis. You cannot handle that. Since you cannot foresee whether your investment project will be beneficial, profitable or not, then you cannot decide to go for that investment project or not. So lower predictability means higher risk. Higher risk means lower investment demand. Free trade versus protectionism is also an essential topic to be discussed in the context of populism. It is a very old, eternal, almost eternal debate whether we should follow free trade policies or protectionist policies. This has been a debate discussed or debated by even before the advent of the modern economics, founded by founding father Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Malthus, and all the classical liberals. Even before them, there were physiocrats. Even before them, there were mercantilists. You can even see, the debate over free trade versus protectionism in classical Islamic thinkers, Ibn Khaldun and all the, Ibn Rushd, Imam Ghazali, etc. Also, some ancient Greek philosophers as well. So it's an eternal debate. Both opponents and supporters are everywhere and all the time. You can see at any time in every country, there are some people, some leaders, some politicians, some academics, some intellectuals who are for free trade. There are some academics, intellectuals, researchers, political managers, etc., who are for protectionism. Okay, both have, interestingly enough, both have appealing arguments. For example, I can enumerate at least 10 arguments advocated by protectionists. Let's say national security, man, autarky or self-sufficiency, they say. Infant industry argument, reducing unemployment, and allocating domestic markets for domestic producers, not foreigners. Environmental protection, also another argument. Preventing child labor is another argument raised by protectionists. Anti-dumping against foreign companies who are selling their products, as they claim, with dumping that is below their cost. Also, there are some arguments raised by protectionists for balance of payment deficit, to reduce balance of payment deficit. In other words, there are so many arguments raised by protectionists everywhere, at every country and all the time, which would sound appealing at a first glance. If you do not go into details, if you do not look at the actually facts and figures, historical figures, and the experience of nations, then many of these arguments would seem very appealing. Okay. On the other hand, we have free traders. We have advocates or supporters of free trade, including Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Frederick Bastiat, Milton Friedman, Mustafa Acar, etc., etc. All protectionist arguments, they say, have no sound base. As they say in a fantastic way, Satan is hidden in details, or the devil is hidden in details. When you look at the details, actually, none of those arguments, protectionist arguments, have a sound base, they say. Plus, let's put all those protectionist arguments together, garbage into garbage. Yet, after that, free trade means higher quality products. Free trade means larger supply of goods and services. Free trade means cheaper products. Free trade means faster real economic growth possibilities. Free trade means higher welfare. Free trade means more choice for individuals in every sense. In a free trade world, there are more choice before people. They don't have to repeat their father's profession, if you like. They have more choice to go outside, to look after higher education, go abroad, market their products to all over the world, get benefit of technologies, modern technologies, internet, social media, etc., etc. So from both material as well as non-material point of view, in a free world, they say, individuals have larger, more choices in every sense. Okay. What about populism and economic globalization? As I mentioned, remember, free traders are for open markets, are for free economic competition, are for free market economy. But populist movements, populist leaders, most of the time they are against free trade. They are for protectionism. Under these circumstances, what can we say about populism and economic globalization? Free markets were championed, as I mentioned, as foundation of globalization, connecting distant nations and creating interdependent economies. In a globalized world, customs duties are taken to a very low level, even abolished. So, open borders, goods and services are allowed to cross the borders. People are free to go abroad. Capital, technology, goods and services, everything is free to cross the borders in a globalized world, okay? So free markets, free competition, free trade are the foundation of globalization. But again, we mentioned populist movements view globalization as eroding national sovereignty. Come on, we are losing our independence. We are losing our national sovereignty. There are increasing inequalities everywhere. So poor, lower middle class, and the poor people and the workers are actually lacking behind. And globalization is harming our domestic industries. Free trade is giving, harmful effects on our domestic industries. So let's go against globalization. Let's advocate for protectionism and say populist leaders often advocate for localism. Domestic and national are preferred by them rather than international and universal. Economic nationalism is very high. They are most of the time base their arguments on, to taking advantage of the nationalist feelings of the masses, of the people, especially those who are negatively affected by the foreign competition, those who lose their jobs for a temporary period as a result of the harsh competition in a globalized world. They are taking advantage of those nationalist feelings and advocate for protectionism. So they talk about sourcing locally, manufacturing domestically, buying and selling domestic products rather than foreign products. And they say, by doing this, by going economic nationalism and protectionist policies, what are we doing? We are reducing reliance on foreign markets. We are trying to keep our youth, create domestic employment possibilities, increasing domestic employment so that trying to reduce unemployment, they say. So you can see a lot of arguments by populist leaders to advocate for protectionism, against globalization, against free trade economy. Okay. Populism and state intervention. Free market economic system advocates, as you know, guys, for limited government and minimal intervention.
Dr. Mustafa?
Yes, sir.
Sorry for interruption. You can like to conclude like in next 5 minutes or so, or 10 minutes? How would you plan?
Okay. 10 minutes, I think we can finish that.
Thank you.
Okay. Free market economic system advocates for limited government and minimal intervention. No intervention is the best situation, as they say. So prices should be determined by free interaction of market forces, demand and supply. On the contrary, populist policies favor protectionism, against free trade, stronger state involvement, frequent government intervention to markets, even determining prices of critical inputs, etc. So as a result, when we are talking about populism, populist movements, political movements, we are talking about big government and state control over the economic issues. They most of the time increase government spending on social safety nets, welfare payments, social aid, etc., leading to huge budget deficits. And when you have budget deficit, there are only three ways to finance them. So I will leave it to our conversation time regarding, how can we finance our budget deficit and what would be the unintended negative consequences of those using those instruments. Okay, let's try to wrap up the future of free markets in a populist world. Okay, so last two slides, Ali. The future of free markets in a populist world. What can we say about that? As everyone would agree, free markets of goods and services, as well as financial markets, rely on basically what? Stability, transparency, and predictability. If there is stability, if there is transparency and accountability, if there is predictability, then market forces can freely function and smoothly function so that the prices are determined by the price mechanism, by the free interaction of demand and supply, buyers and sellers. And in a free market economy, everything will be smoothly functioning where we have stability, transparency, accountability, and predictability. But populist policies involve what? Rapid policy changes most of the time. Rapid. From day to day, from 1 week to another, you can see frequent policy changes. Policies based on personal discretion. Who is that person? That person is the powerful, charismatic leader. Policies based on personal choice, personal discretion in economic terms. For example, they would like to see lower interest rates to boost borrowing, consumption, and higher economic growth. If you do that, for instance, irregardless of other macroeconomic variables and the interaction between them, if you force interest rates to be lower through political order, then there are unforeseen, unintended negative consequences, as we have been suffering in Turkey for the last 3 years. So, populist policies involve what? Rapid policy changes, personal discretion or discretionary economic policies, hence unpredictability. You cannot be sure what is going to happen tomorrow, who is going to do what 2 weeks from now, something like that. But as I mentioned again, unpredictability, unforeseeability leads to lower investments, lower foreign direct investment flows, slower economic growth, and higher inflation. Take a typical rational investor. He has some resources, some financial funds, etc., to invest here and there. If there is unpredictability, then they cannot see near future. They cannot calculate the probable cost and benefit of their projects, investment projects. Since they have no clear idea about the profitability of their project, they cannot take a step to actually make that investment. So, if there is no investment, there is no job creation. If there is no job creation, there is no employment increasing possibilities. Higher unemployment follows, slower growth follows, and when you have increasing huge government expenditures, you are going to sooner or later, eventually, unavoidably, will give huge budget deficits. And those budget deficits can be financed either by higher taxes or by borrowing or by printing money. Then by printing money, that means increasing money supply, will lead to, unfortunately, higher inflation, which is seen in many countries today. So, in other words, we are living in a world in a difficult time. We are going through a difficult time, my friends. Populist movements are on the rise, and they are not very friendly with the pillars of free market economic system. They are not very friendly with free trade policies, open borders, free market, etc., etc. On the opposite, on the contrary, they are for nationalism, closed borders, protectionism, government intervention, etc., etc. So what can be done then? This is the last slide. Okay, despite a lot of challenges by populism and populist political movements, free market principles remain deeply in many economies. Now, in a globalized, we are living in a globalized world where many economies, many countries are actually integrated. Economic integration is a fact of our world, right? There are multinational corporations, there are businessmen, there are companies, there are investors who would like to actually use some of their funds, their investment projects to go abroad and get advantage of, cheaper labor or cheaper input or sources, etc., etc. So they would like to market their products all over the world rather than just local markets. So in other words, free trade, open markets, free market principles have been actually 250 years of experience. And we can say those principles remain deeply in many economies, even though not all. Everyone should take, in my opinion, a responsibility and do his or her own part in such a world. We are actually exposed to certain challenges coming from rising populism and populist political movements, populist political leaders, etc. But we should not keep silent. We should not disregard what's going on. We should not close our eyes and ears about what's going on in the world, in our country, in our locality, etc. So open markets, competition, free trade, free entrepreneurship are better for wealth creation, new technologies, employment creation, higher welfare, and higher life standards. These are well documented by many empirical studies. So our countries, the experience of humanity in the last century, if you like, or 250 years, or for the last 500 years, or after the advent of free market capitalism, if you like, right? You can well document that actually open markets, open borders, free trade, competition, free entrepreneurship are better for wealth creation, for increasing the life standards, employment creation, etc. So one possible, okay, but you would say, yes, but it's our reality that populist political movements and charismatic populist leaders are on the rise all over the world. What can be done? What can we do? Then let's say if we search for a middle ground, okay, even though we do not disregard, we do not turn our back to those populist political movements, what can be done? I would say one possible approach to reconcile populist concerns with free market principles, we can focus on inclusive, entrepreneurial, free market capitalism and economic integration, if you like, because when we talk about free market capitalism or entrepreneurial capitalism, my dear friends, this is one book that I recently translated, written by Dong Yun Park, Capitalism in the 21st Century. Another book by Rainer Dittelmann, I translated last year. These are among the books that I translated that you mentioned, Ali. I translated several books from English. It was 20 books. These are more recent ones. Anti-capitalist fallacies. The original one is this one. Anti-capitalist fallacies. And this is Capitalism in the 21st Century. They can provide you with a lot of facts and figures. How entrepreneurial capitalism, how free markets, how free trade can create higher life standards, higher volume of employment, lower level of unemployment, and higher earning possibilities, etc. So we can, as academics, as civil society activists, as well as researchers, we can actually focus working on also promoting these ideas that open borders are better than closed borders, free trade is better than protectionism, being universal is better than nationalist, okay, and less government intervention is better than more government intervention. Predictability is better than uncertainty. So we can ask our leaders, our political, politicians, and those who are involved active politics, we can try to enlighten them, to direct their attention to the facts about if we are for a better life, a higher welfare level, higher life standards, then protectionism and nationalism is not the way to go, but rather free markets, open markets, free trade, and economic integration is a better way to go. So let me stop here and thank you for listening patiently. Ali?
Yes, I'm coming to you now. Maybe you can stop this presentation view now.
Yes, I can.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa Acar. I think this was very comprehensive. And I like the fact that how you linked both free market principles and the principles of populism. And then you showed the implication of populism in the economy, in the economic sphere. And you showed clearly the differences in the free market approach and a populist approach. And I'm sure there will be a lot of interest in this discussion. One of the very first question we have, I also have a couple of questions, but I'll refer to the participants first. Is actually an obvious question. We were talking about President-elect Trump. And this was the first question, and I think by Ahmed, and the question is, how might Trump's populist approach, which claims to represent the people against the elite? So these are the words which you used in your presentation. Someone was listening very keenly. Shape his economic policies during his next term. Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, this is a good question. Thank you for asking. It's like, in Turkish, there is an interesting phrase. Bu ne yaman çelişki anne. How fantastic a contradiction is this, my mom, they say, okay? Trump himself is a billionaire, okay? It's a big guy. He has a lot of companies, firms, etc., etc. He's a billionaire. He's a very rich man, yet he claims to be the representative of the man on the street. Come on. He actually uses a rhetorical arguments to take advantage of the fears and the anxieties of the men on the street, the lower middle class people, some black Americans, etc., who are, and also those who are actually opposed to foreign competition from Chinese cheaper products. He is actually using these arguments to be like, I will be your representative. I am going to protect you from the foreign competition, cheaper and low quality Chinese products, etc. So on one side, the local domestic American companies would support him. Okay, he are going to implement. He's going to implement protectionist policies. That means we are going to have better possibilities to sell more products within the United States market. On the other hand, those who the lower middle class people, men on the street working on the factories, like workers, laborers. When we implement protectionist policies against Chinese competition from Chinese products, from outside competition, that means there will be higher demand for our own products. So our own local companies will be flourishing. So they will demand more jobs, more laborers. So there will be higher possibilities for employment for the man on the street, he says. Also, he also uses some anxieties of the people against migrant people coming from outside, possibly coming from, outside countries to the United States, migrants, immigrants. He is using this argument, okay, I am going to protect you from the newcomers. I am not going to allow them to enter into this market, enter into this country, so that there will be more chance for you to get employed. Because otherwise, when we allow migrants freely from all over the world, then they will be stealing your job, they say. So these are the fears or the anxieties of some of the people, men on the street, who actually not in a comfortable situation in a world of free competition, free flow of goods and services, free flow of laborers, right? So actually, even though he is not a man, ordinary man, he is not a middle class man, he is a billionaire, he is taking advantage of and using the arguments, to protectionist arguments, to give a sense of comfort to those who suffer from the harsh competition in a globalized world, so that they vote for him rather than for his opponents.
Thank you. There's another question. Well, Mustafa Raji asked the same question, but then he also asked another question, and that is about the Chinese products. The argument which the from U.S. side and let's say from Donald Trump and his friends is that Chinese products may harm the U.S. institutions because they are government-supported products, and also they can offer like threat to national security. And because of the way Chinese economy is structured, obviously there's huge government intervention. And in your presentation, you also talked about government intervention as being part of the, problem. Although that was a different context. How do you see this argument, Chinese versus U.S., and then the argument of limiting free trade with China because of the government presence in China?
Good. Ali, my dear friends as well. There is a fantastic book by Russell Roberts. Russell D. Roberts. The Choice. The original title is The Choice, a Fable of Free Trade versus Protectionism. Okay. It is a fantastic allegorical story. A debate between the ghost of David Ricardo, who proposed originally the famous foreign trade theory, liberal free trade theory, theory of comparative advantages, and an American television producer, Ed Johnson, in a fantastic world where they can travel through between 1960 and 2000 Americas, okay? If United States follow free trade policies, where would it be after 40 years? And if it follows protectionist policies, where would that road take you in 40 years? I would urge guys, if you did not already read the book, I would suggest to read it, because there are many arguments for and against protectionism in that book. And Ricardo is not an ordinary man. Ricardo is one of the classical liberal economists who also set up the most famous foreign trade theory, the theory of comparative advantages. He actually proved that even though a country might have absolute advantages on both products, let's say, in a world of two goods and two countries, even if a country has absolute advantages on both products, there is still a possibility for profitable trade and increasing welfare of both countries. It is still possible to trade, go into specialization based on the comparative advantages, taking into account the opportunity cost of leaving this product at the expense of this product. What should I forego in order to produce 1 unit more of the product? How much should I forego? Take that calculation and find the area in which you have comparative advantages, and you will realize actually there will be a world, both total production will be higher in a specialized free trade world. Both production will be higher and consumption will be higher. Hence, both countries will benefit from free trade. He proved this some 220 years ago, at the beginning of 19th century, in the 1820s. Okay. Now, who is going to benefit from cheaper Chinese products? American citizens, American consumers. If there was no free trade, if there was no cheaper products coming from China or India or whoever, in Malaysia or Turkey, right? There would be less product within the United States, and there will be less supply, lower quality of the American products I'm talking about, with higher prices. So, the manufacturing industry, remember, textile industries. Bangladesh is exporting, one of the major Asian countries who is actually earning a lot of export earnings from exports, textile exports. Who is going to benefit from those cheaper Bangladeshi textile products? American and Europeans. So, in other words, even though some American companies would suffer from the competition and cheaper products coming from China, there will be millions and tens of millions of American consumers who are going to benefit from being able to get of those cheaper products. So please do not fall into trap exploited our nationalist feelings by populist leaders. They are actually trying to protect the interest of the local domestic producers, a few local domestic producers, by advocating, protections policies, but leaving millions of consumers on their own. So yes, there will be some losers when there is free competition coming from outside, be it China or India or Malaysia or Turkey or wherever. There will be some who suffer from those cheaper products. Yes, but there will be millions, even tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of people who are going to benefit, who are going to, raise their living standards with that, thanks to being able to purchase more higher quality, more variability of goods and services.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is you have elaborated it quite comprehensively, and in that way, you have already answered the next question, which was a follow-up comment by Nadeem Server about the how do you see this? And I think the consumer advantage is your answer, and how even the cheaper products from China is going to help expand choices for consumers, improving living standards. So that's your answer. I want.
Sorry, Ali. Let me add one point.
Yes.
China, yes, there is many Chinese companies are related with it, directly or indirectly with Chinese government. Yes, remember, China is on the paper still a communist country, right?
Right.
Managed or ruled by Chinese Communist Party. But as underlined very fantastically and very clearly by Dong-Yun Park. He is an Asian. He's a Korean, okay, who had his PhD in University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA, in the United States. Now he is working in Asian Development Bank in the Philippines. He's an Asian man. He is observing what's going on all over the world. What kind of capitalism are we facing in China, in Europe, in Scandinavian countries, and the United States as well? He says, okay, millions, hundreds of millions of people were raised out of poverty in China, not thanks to state intervention, not thanks to communist central planning policies, but rather entrepreneurs, Chinese entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurial capitalism and free trade of China with the outside world, accepting the rules and regulation standards by the WTO, getting into the world markets, and then allowing the foreign direct investments of coming from United States and the Western European countries in China, Shanghai, and in many other Chinese countries, cities. So through that, not because of the central planning and communist protectionist policies, but rather entrepreneurial capitalism and free trade policies in China implemented after the death of the leader of, founding leader of China, Mao. After he passed away in late 1970s by, very smart guy, Xiaoping, actually changed the policies of China, and China became very integrated with the world economy. And through that policies, free trade policies, open border policies, allowing foreign direct investment into China and exporting Chinese products to all over the world, made Chinese people get out of the poverty level.
Thank you. Let me just take you to the next two questions. First of all, also there is a request by participants if you could write the names of the books you have mentioned in the chat box, and they can, reference it.
Okay.
The question takes us back to the history, also in the special context of Muslim culture or Muslim majority countries by Fida Rahman. And I think this is also reflective of Mustafa, your own past work, especially in the evolution of the Ahl al-Rai and Ahl al-Hadith. One of your very fantastic essays which you wrote in the book, the free society, the principles of free society, the Islamic principles of free society. Remember, the question is, how can the libertarian values regarding markets be introduced and promoted in Muslim majority countries, especially those who have remained colonized? Is there any feasible model of economic reformation that is deeply embedded in the indigenous wisdom rather than being labeled as Western in order to have larger acceptance? So that's the question, really. How would you like to answer that?
Ali, can you just briefly rephrase the second question again, please?
Yes, sure. So in the Muslim majority countries, there might be resistance to these economic ideas, like they might be perceived as Western ideas, free market ideas. So would you like to propose something which is more acceptable to local wisdom? This is according to the participant we have, Mr. Fida.
Okay. Good question. Thank you for raising, guys. Those are very fantastic, good questions. Let me direct you to your attention to one, my article, as you mentioned, Ali, like reason versus tradition.
Yes.
Free will versus qadar or fate.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's an important topic to discuss. My dear friends, let's put it very openly, clearly. Freedom, free trade, open markets. Individual rights and liberties are not Western values. These are human values. These are universal values. These are actually embedded and flourished in the early Muslim period, Islamic civilization, centuries ago, centuries before the advent of modern capitalism in Western Europe. I can direct you to two books. One is İslam'ın erken döneminde kapitalizmin doğuşu. The English version. Actually, this is a book by Benedict Kohler, a German researcher. Okay. The Birth of Capitalism, Early Islam, and the Birth of Capitalism. The original book of, original title of this book is The Early Islam and the Birth of Capitalism. Another book by Professor Murat Çizakça and Mustafa Acar. Okay, these are Turkish free traders, free market, supporters. intellectuals, ahlaki capitalism, the moral capitalism, they say, okay? In other words, when we look at the early implementations, early economic policies during the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and rightly after then the followers, the economic policies implemented by Umayyad periods, Abbasid periods, partly in Andalusia, Spain Muslims, okay? There are three main characteristics of Medina Pazar or Medina market, if you like, okay? The first thing, when Prophet ﷺ migrated from Mecca to Medina, the first thing he did, one of the first things he did is to set up a market in Medina. Number one. Number two, Prophet ﷺ was a trader himself. Remember, he used to lead the caravans from Damascus to Mecca, Medina, etc. Right? There were three basic characteristics of Medina Bazaar. One, it was set up on a flat area. Flat area means transparency. You can see everyone, all products, what's going on. There is no, let's say, hidden things over there. It's transparent. It's can be seen everywhere. You can see the products. So it's a flat area. Second, when they asked, some of the Sahaba asked Prophet ﷺ to fix the prices, they said, Ya Rasulullah, prices went up, huge. So we are suffering from that. Could you please make it lower? After thinking 3 days, okay, expecting a revelation, something about this thing, he said, no, I am not allowed to fix prices. Prices are determined by God. In other words, prices are determined by the interaction of hundreds of people, men and women on the marketplace. It's an interaction of demand and supply, in other words, okay? He said, I do not want to go to the hereafter and then, with a burden on my shoulders because of my fixation of prices. That means there is no fixing prices, which is free market price mechanism. Today's price mechanism, nothing else. Prices should be determined by the free interaction of goods, buyers and sellers. Okay. Number three, there was no a specific corner allocated to a specific person perpetually. Okay. In other words, this week or this month, I came earlier than you. That's why I market my products at this corner. But if you come earlier than me next time, it is yours. So that corner is not mine, is not allocated to anyone. That means this is the open market. People, purchasers or producers or marketers are free to enter. There was no monopoly, okay? No one has a monopoly power to keep a specific corner all the time. So when we look at these and some other practices that is mentioned by the early Islam and the birth of capitalism by Benedict Kohler in this book, we can easily say that centuries before Adam Smith and David Ricardo and other classical liberals, advocated for open markets, limited government, no intervention, prices determined by the market forces, etc., etc. We see similar practices in the Muslim world, in the Islamic civilizations, different corners. So let's be confident on the fact that free markets, individual rights and liberties, open markets, free trade, and those institutions who make life easier for consumers and entrepreneurs, okay? These are all common human values, universal values, not specific to, peculiar to, developed only by the Western Europe or European Western philosophers, okay? We are part of, as Muslims, we are part of humanity, and our religion is universal religion. The Prophet was sent to be the rahmah to all world. You know, the وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We sent you to be the rahmah for all of the world. So our religion is a universal religion. So think broadly and say, okay, there are values, universal values, which we should accept, which we should internalize, and we should advocate for. And don't feel shy about, oh, these are better represented by, these are better rephrased by or developed by some Westerns. Don't be shy about that. There is another saying of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ilm, you know, the science is something Muslim is chasing after. Wherever you find it, get it. Okay, so science and the scientific facts is common values, common treasury of humanity, not peculiar to West or East or South or North. Remember, our God, Allah, is the Rab of the West as well as the East. Okay, Allah doğunun da batının da Rabbidir. God is the Rab of everywhere.
Great. Let me now ask, maybe this is the last question of today's webinar and can be a bit tricky. This is my own question. In your presentation, when you were talking about the populism, you mentioned about democratic populism and authoritarian populism.
Yeah.
So you had these two sort of types. One of the points which you mentioned in your presentation was referring to populist policies, and you gave the example of lowering interest rate to boost consumption. And if I'm not mistaken, of course, now it is not the case. Turkey is having 50% inflation and 50% of interest rate right now, but it was not the case a few years back. And for many years, Erdogan government followed what I understand, very low interest rate inspired by religious arguments, religiously popular, I would say religiously popular arguments, which was criticized by economists and even, the Turkey's own central banks, governors, ex-governors, they were criticizing, but this policy continued for several years. So, and it may have affected very negatively macroeconomic fundamentals. How do you explain that phenomena and the change which you see now?
Okay, very good question, Ali. Thank you for asking that. Let me talk about one of my books. It says İktisadın evrensel yasaları ve kadim sorunları in Turkish. In English, meaning universal laws and ancient problems of economics. Okay. There are, my dear friends, in my opinion, universal laws of economics, just like natural laws, just like physical laws. If you observe them, you get benefit out of it. If you do not observe them, if you just disregard them, you are going to pay a big price, which is exactly exemplified by what you are asking, Ali. Turkish political leaders, out of religious concerns, they are Muslims, they might be sincere Muslims, fine, no problem with that. Remember, riba is forbidden in our religion. And it is well documented by certain verses of Quran. Okay, riba is, yes, forbidden. So by equating in every sense 100% equality between interest, modern interest with riba, unfortunately leads to certain difficulties, contradictions, conflicts, and irrational economic policies that would bring a huge price paid by all nations out of religious sentiments or expectations. They wanted to make interest rates as low as possible. Zero, if it is possible. Okay. A few years back, when there was already inflation on the rise, when we were suffering from lower levels of foreign exchange reserves, high unemployment, especially youth unemployment, and some other problems. Okay, actually, the interest rate is an intermediary, an economic variable that is intermediating to equilibrate many macroeconomic variables together, to put together. Okay, if there is, shortage of financial resources in financial markets, then automatically the interest rate is expected to go up. When there is not shortage but excessive financial resources, then they fall down automatically. So interest rate actually is a balancing factor between many macroeconomic indicators: economic growth, foreign trade balance, current account balance, foreign exchange reserves, inflation, etc., etc. Okay. If you disregard this and say, okay, I am ordering central bank to reduce interest so that I'm expecting to boost consumption, to boost, how do you say, financial expansion in the credit markets. When interest rate is low, then the money is cheaper. It means cheap money means everyone would like to get more and more money in the form of loans, credits. When they get cheaper money, they have a lot of credits and they go, to buy cars, food, gold, or foreign exchange, or land, many things. That means demand will go up unproportionately. That is, rising demand, excess demand will lead to higher prices. Higher prices mean inflation. Okay. So even though our macroeconomic conditions were not suitable to falling interest rates, political authority should try to lower interest rates through political order, political pressure on central bank. What happened? The expectations turned into negative, and then many people just started to buy foreign exchange. Then the exchange rates started to go skyrocketingly high. So they had to put another instrument, which we call in Turkish kur korumalı mevduat. That is foreign exchange risk covered deposit, something like that. Okay. And then it brought a huge cost on the treasury first and then central bank, eventually in the form of higher inflation paid by all nations. Right now, you already mentioned, we are suffering from an inflation record high in the world, together with Argentina or something, 50%. Last year it was even higher. 2 years ago it was even higher. 80%, 90%. This is official figures. If you look at the unofficial figures, okay, some civilian initiatives prepared by or calculated by some civilian initiatives, it was even higher than this. Today we are talking about 50% official rate of inflation, but the unofficial figures say it is around 90%, which means inflation is something detrimental to every single individual as a producer, as an entrepreneur, as a consumer, as an investor, okay, as a sale, whoever you are, because you are losing the purchasing power. Your purchasing power of money is going down. You are becoming poorer people. So high inflation is something that we are suffering from in recent years out of some irrational, unorthodox, meaningless policies dictated by the political leadership. And they, in the end, they realized that actually that was not a good way to go, since the local elections results a year ago. Then they had to stop those policies, irrational policies, and they appointed a Ministry of Finance. Actually, some time ago, he was at the same duty, but somehow he was excluded from the government for some reasons, right? And then in the end, they had to reappoint him as the Minister of Finance. He has been doing hard to actually implement more rational economic policies, which means nominal interest rates should be somehow closer to rate of inflation, okay, so that people can protect their purchasing power more or less, okay. So he has been doing something to repair it, but we didn't have to do that. In other words, there are universal laws of economics we should be aware of. If you observe them, the whole nation, producers, entrepreneurs, as well as consumers, will benefit from those. If not, as the political leaders make a mistake on these important laws, right, then the price will be paid by the whole nation. There's a famous poet in the late Ottoman period, Ziya Pasha. Maybe you might have heard about him, Ziya Pasha, a very famous poet and a statesman. He's a very smart guy. One of his poets, he said, "Sarban vakti sen hazmeyle, zira vakt olur, bir topal merkep belasıyla Katar elden gider." That means, if you are in a position to lead the community, okay, please be careful, not do mistake. If you do that, then the price of your mistake will be huge and will be paid by the whole nation. You will lose the whole caravan, okay, trade, camels, because of the mistake made by the donkey that is taking a wrong way, something like that, okay? So in other words, mistakes of the leaders, of the people, of the government are paid by the price of the mistakes made by the popular, political leaders are made by the whole nation. We keep that in mind. So we should observe universal laws of economics. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa. This was brilliant. I really enjoyed, having this conversation with you and listening to you as always. I think you brought both your theory, practice, history, and direct political commentary on economic developments, very pertinent to our audience. And I'm sure this will be watched with great interest over our platforms in next few weeks and months. With this, we bring this webinar to a close. Again, thank you to our partners, and thank you especially to Dr. Mustafa Acar to prepare this wonderful, very timely presentation on the free market in the age of populism, with his deep insights. And I also wish that some of your recent work, particularly you mentioned last work on the universal laws, should be translated in English for the
I hope so.
audience. Someone can do it, I hope, for the benefit of many others. Again, thank you, and thank you for all to our wonderful and engaged quality audience. And we will meet again in the next episode of ILN Edraak. Till then, you please take good care, and hope to see you again, Dr. Mustafa.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, and take care of yourself. Fi aman Allah.
Iman Allah.